for you or send you the. What I'd like to do though is let you know as far as questions, you can ask them during the presentation, but please use the chat room. And at the end, there will also be time to answer questions on the chat room as well. So on that note, I'm going to introduce Mr. Nichols, Dave Nichols. Welcome him back. He did a great job last week, and today it's going to be a little shorter. But for those of you just to get a sense of planning getting started, here is Mr. Nichols.
Well, thanks, Ann. So just a quick background. I know some of you that are here were here last week, so I don't want to bore you with too much. I'm the principal of St. Joseph's Maumee. We're a suburban Catholic school in Maumee, Ohio. And we have an enrollment of 300 students, K to 8 with 65 preschoolers. Our John Peterson program began 8 years ago with a single student part-time. And then we have grown the program up to 20 students that are on individual education plans. And then there's actually another 5 students on IEPs, which are, they're classified as category 1. And the terminology that's used through the Peterson Scholarship is their speech only. And the reason that there's a differentiation there is because the speech only kiddos, you cannot use their scholarship for tuition. But there is an advantage of having those students in the Peterson portal, because if they do require intervention services, there's a way to go about giving them intervention services and speech services at the same time. So just getting started, a little background on that. We started, like I said, with 1 student. We determined that we needed support for this particular student. She had cochlear implants. She was born deaf. And she needed an intervention specialist, and she needed a speech therapist here in the school. So we did not realize the scope of what she absolutely needed. So I didn't get to apply for the scholarship until after doing the second half scholarship, because it was divided at that time and there were cutoffs. So we got her an intervention specialist the second half of the school year, very part-time. She was a retired Notre Dame sister that a lot of the Notre Dame sisters had their special education degree. And then we also had a part-time retired speech therapist come out of retirement to come to the school to be able to provide services. And then from that point, the floodgates kind of opened. We had students that we had on service plans because we had an ASP speech therapist that we took those service plans and changed them into IEPs. And that helped us get a more permanent speech therapist. And then we also had families who either they found us through the portal, they were unhappy with their current school situation, or just through general advertising that we have a special education department. They managed to find us, and we started reviewing IEPs and getting a part-time intervention specialist to replace our retired sister. And then that part-time intervention specialist became a full-time intervention specialist after we started to get more and more IEPs. So the main key point that I would say is if you have kids on a 504 plan, you should seriously consider John Peterson, because those 504s could turn into an IEP, and those students can stay inside your school to be able to receive those services. Standard scholarship is approximately $10,000, is like $10,025, but they also have categories for students that require a little bit more on the services. For example, our girl with the cochlear implants was receiving a $15,000 scholarship. And then we also have students that require a little bit more services. We have a young girl with Down syndrome. And so she's her scholarship is $27,000, I believe, if I'm remembering the numbers correctly. So if you determine that you do have a need and you have a student with IEPs, go to the SAFE account and apply for Peterson through the portal. And then once you are approved, I would review the IEPs to make sure that you can provide those services. Just a reminder, it's your choice on what services you're providing. So if you don't have to provide physical therapy. If you don't wish to hire a physical therapist, we don't. But standard is really speech therapy and an intervention services. Another key factor in it is to be able to talk to your other surrounding schools. There's a potential that 2 schools, especially like here in the Toledo Diocese, 2 schools could share an intervention specialist to where they're full-time, but for each school that they're part-time. So it's look to share resources. Something I mentioned last time, which is a tremendous help, is having a good working relationship with the special education department of the public district that you're in, because they're the ones that have to do the ETRs. If the student comes from that public district, they're the ones that are going to have to write the IEPs. So I have 5 public districts intervention specialists that I have to deal with. They're all on my Christmas card list. And we're very grateful for their services. Sometimes they're a challenge to deal with, but that's just life. It's difficult dealing with other human beings sometimes. So, but we're all trying to play nice in the same sandbox. If a public district does not want to play nice in the same sandbox, just know the law and know what they're legally required to do to help service the kids that are at your school. It's making acquaintances. So the secretary for the special education department at Maumee City Schools, I know we're on a first name basis and we talk constantly. And if there's something that I tell her, my motto is to keep Sue happy. So if there's something we're not reporting to the public district that we need to be, she calls me and I make sure that that gets taken care of so that she can do her job better. She stays happy. She keeps us in good graces with the special education director there. It's not your responsibility to make sure the kids are in compliance. They're in dates with their IEPs. They're in dates with their ETRs. That is the responsibility of the public school. And if they get audited, you don't get dinged, they get dinged. So they're always nervous about kids not in their buildings that they have to review the IEPs for. So making sure that they're updated and giving them good communication on expiring IEPs and giving them a heads up that things need to be reviewed and redone on an annual basis just helps them out tremendously. And that's a good way to build a nice bridge and a working relationship, is maintaining knowledge of your IEPs and when they expire and giving the public district a 30-day heads up that this IEP is expiring soon. And that helps them out. So once you identify students in your building that might need a multi-factored evaluation, as I said before, the PR04 form is the form that you fill out to hand to a public district. Once they receive that, they have 60 days to finish testing or offer the parents a viable explanation as to why they're not testing. The one explanation that they will offer parents is that the school didn't progress monitor correctly. If the school doesn't progress monitor, so make sure your teachers are saving tests, make sure your teachers are saving the standardized tests that are there. One program that does help with progress monitoring that's very good, it's expensive, is Renaissance STAR testing. So if your school's currently doing STAR testing with your kids, that's something the public districts mostly use around this area. You can hand them those test results and that can justify multi-factored evaluation. The scholarship does have to be renewed every single year. And you do that during the month of November is when the renewal application opens up. And then, Anne, if you want to share some of those examples of the paperwork to the people that were not here last week, and what that is just examples of the forms that you would need to be able to apply for the Peterson scholarship, insurance liability waiver, the W-9, and your fire and safety inspections. Those all have to be uploaded into the portal to be able to apply for the application, and then familiarizing yourself with the services pages of the IEPs so that you know how many minutes a student is required to be able to have services is really good. And I put a sample of those in the packet that I sent over to Anne as a student. So that's there. The fee schedule I also shared. Those are the fees that we charge. So fee schedules that are there, you can charge whatever you want for the services that you're providing. That's solely up to the individual school on what they want to charge. So if you're intervention specialist, you're charging $50 an hour for intervention. You're charging $50 an hour where another school might be charging $35 an hour or $65 an hour. You can charge whatever you want, but the fee schedule has to be uploaded so the state of Ohio knows what you're billing for. Once you get up and running and you're providing those services, the billing, it can be tedious. It's not complicated, but it can be tedious. So if you have a person assigned to be able to do billing, that's a good way to go. And then your intervention specialist, your speech therapist should be set up in the portal as data inputers so that they can put in their progress reports. They don't have to send them to a person who puts them into the portal. The speech therapist, occupational therapist, and the intervention specialist here all put in their own progress reports. So when I go to do the billing. When I go to do the billing, the progress reports I submit to the state of Ohio, and then there's a tab that's in the portal. I can print those progress reports out, send them home with the report cards, because most IEPs will have that you communicate progress every 9 weeks, and then that will go through. So what Ann is showing you is the services pages. I believe that's being shared, yes, okay, the services pages. So if you just look at the bottom there, that shows what type of service. The second column is the goal and the objective. So it's objective 1 point, or it's objective 3 of goal number 1. And that is who provides that service. That's the speech language pathologist. Designated therapy room is whatever room you have available. And then the box below that will show the amount of time and then the frequency of that time. So for example, you're bouncing around on me, Ann. There you go.
Sorry,
So
what page would you like, Dave?
That one's fine. Just scroll down to the
Okay.
bottom of that where it says amount of
Okay,
time.
let's see. I don't know, let me scroll. Oh, there we go.
Yeah,
Too much
so
technology.
40 minutes monthly for that particular goal, and the speech therapist needs, that's the minimum amount of time. When parents sign that they accept the scholarship, they say that they are rejecting the legalities of the IEP and turning that IEP into a parental guidance document. That's fine, but we as a school want to uphold everything that's in that IEP. So we do meet the minimum number of minutes for every single student on their IEPs. So 40 minutes for that particular student monthly will be met by the school. And I promise the parents that. Most of our services do go above that minimum requirement, but most of them, we do meet the minimum amount of time in minutes. So this particular student needs 10 minutes a week for that particular goal and objective. And we just have a nice little small room where the speech therapist doesn't have any outside distractions, and she works with the student, and she'll go and pull them from class. So it's a good way to go. Just to familiarize yourself with those columns and how much time requirement there is for every one of your services. And then also in the Peterson portal to budget in, they have to do progress reports. They have to meet with parents. That's all a part of their time that you can bill for the speech therapist. So it's not just the minutes that the speech therapist was meeting with the student. And if they did 60 minutes monthly, then bill for it. It's something that's billable for it. And you can bill for the time that person is working with that student. The way we do it is the speech therapist just keeps a chart. At the end of the quarter, when I go to billing, she hands me the chart of the number of minutes she worked with each student. And then I just calculate it up, multiply it times the hourly rate, and put that in for that student in the portal for billing. Cool. And then the other thing, to not be discouraged, when you upload everything to the portal and you become a provider, it's all going to go through the correction needed process. Just each one of those is a challenge that you have to solve, and not to get discouraged by correction needed. If you are an Ed Choice provider, you're already ahead of the curve, because the same forms that are necessary for Ed Choice are also there for Peterson. So you can just import them from the Ed Choice portal right into Peterson. That's good, Ann. You do have to have in your handbook FERPA. So I just grabbed our handbook and printed out the pages where FERPA is. And that's the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. Pretty much states that IEPs are completely confidential. You're not going to share that information with anybody except the parties necessary. And then if there is a transfer of the student and you don't send IEPs over there, that you're going to destroy them in the appropriate fashion. And you keep all those records secret and confidential as much as humanly possible. And the one thing that can, to remind your intervention specialist, if they're emailing a general email out to the students that they serve, that they make sure that all the names go in the BCC category, so parents don't see who other parents are as far as the kids that are having an IEP. And to make sure your teachers know that that has to be kept confidential going forward. So if they have a student on an IEP, just the parents need to know that he's on the IEP and the intervention specialist. That doesn't need to be discussed over with anybody else that's outside of who's going to end up servicing that kid, and just keep everything confidential as much as possible. So it's always a good thing to have the teachers read over the FERPA Act as well, because you do have to align your practices with what's in FERPA. And that does have to be put in your handbook, and then your handbook uploaded, and the state be able to see that FERPA is in there. So there's that. I'm trying to think if there's anything I didn't really touch on.
Here's some information that you mentioned, this one.
Yep. Oh, just the W-9. So that just comes directly from our business manager. And then there's the fee schedule that we're charging for our speech language pathologists, aid services, occupational services, intervention services. We do have 2 paraprofessionals that will go around into the individual classrooms to work with kids. They're under the direction of the intervention specialist. You can't have a para without an intervention specialist. Occupational services, we go through an occupational therapist that's here 2 days a week. And then you could also potentially have an occupational therapy assistant perform the services. Occupational therapist, though, has to do the progress reports. The occupational therapy assistant just does the services. So if you have that situation in hand, we did have a occupational therapy assistant here at the 1 year, and it was she was ours, the OT was ours, but it was a weird situation. We like it with just having an occupational therapist. You don't have to provide those services though, but I found that most students that have to see the speech language pathologist usually have to see the occupational therapist. And again, I like them being our employees, because if the OT has to see a student that's not on Peterson, I can ask them to see a student that's not on Peterson. Because you can turn this all over to your ESCs, but the ESCs will only see the kids that are on the IEPs.
Dave, we've got a couple questions. Are you ready for some questions?
Yeah, sure. I see the application timeline is going to open next week. If I'm remembering my dates correctly, it might not open until November 15th, but I am always uploading things to the Peterson portal to renew the scholarship during November. So you haven't missed out on opening up for next year.
Also, see trying to gauge your workload and personnel needed.
Yes.
Program pays for itself.
It depends. So what I would do is, as far as just a startup, because this will pay for itself. If you have kids on service plans that are seeing a speech therapist, you can transfer those service plans into IEPs and upload those. The speech, we never use the entire scholarship for speech services. The speech services pays for itself every single time. And then what ends up happening with those kids is you can do a request to modify services to use more of the scholarship for it to be able to pay for intervention services. So what I do to make sure that the program is paying for itself is I break down for the parents, every single parent that's on scholarship, I break down what's being covered. So yes, the program will pay for itself as long as you don't promise more than you can deliver. So what we do, we send home to the parents what's called a memorandum of understanding. So I take the IEPs, I take the minimum number of minutes, I add all that up, I multiply times our speech language pathologist hour or whatever there is. And then I have a total amount that is responsible for the scholarship. And then the intervention specialist and all of those services I put in there. I also do charge a 10% administrative fee because I don't work for free. And then that adds all up. And then I subtract that from the scholarship amount. And then anything that's left over will cover tuition. So there are some people that would have to pay some tuition. There are some people that have their tuition completely covered by the scholarship. Usually what happens with the people that have their tuition completely covered by the scholarship is they're only receiving intervention services. So when the speech language pathologist comes in when speech and language is associated and the intervention specialist is seeing a student, those scholarships, there's usually a small amount of tuition that I end up having to charge a particular parent. But that's all laid out before they sign the acceptance form. So that memorandum of understanding comes out early on in the year. I work on them in the first couple of weeks of August. The students come back to school before the scholarship gives them the acceptance letter back home. The parents will get a memorandum of understanding. And I'm sorry, I didn't include a sample one of our MUOs.
Memorandum of understanding. Well, if the
Yeah.
group, I'm not sure if I have emails for all these people, but I can email them if they want to see a copy of it. Or if they want a copy, just email Dave, and you'll get the email or his email address at the end of this presentation.
Yeah, so
enrollment, did you see enrollment now beginning of year, or is mid-year allowed now? Would you take a student mid-year?
I would take a student mid-year, but those are conversations. So every kid that comes to us on an IEP, I always ask the parents for the IEP. And then I go down, I sit down with the intervention specialist and say, can we service this particular child? Are we capable of handling all their needs? And then she reads through the IEP, she will talk and meet with the parents, and then she will come back to me and say, yes, we can manage and service this child, or no, this is what this child needs. Because the last thing I want to do is tell a family, I can't service your child, good luck. So part of the directive that I have for our intervention specialist goes, if we can't service a child, we want to find the direction to point the parent. So we have an autism model school that's here in Northwest Ohio. If there's a kid that's autistic, if there's a kid with autism, they're on the spectrum, they come here and we can't service that particular child, we're going to direct them to an autism model school, or we're going to direct them. I've called the Diocese of Toledo, got their intervention specialist. Where can I guide this family to go? Because parents can get frustrated when they don't know where to go. They're coming to you with their IEP sometimes because they just don't know where to go. And this sounds like a good idea. And they were direct. Sometimes the public school will direct them our way because the student does have a lot of services that are necessary to be provided. And we might be able to do it and we might not. We do accept about 90% of the kids. I don't have to turn a parent away too terribly many times, but sometimes our school's not the best spot for them. We want to find the best spot for the kid. Our intervention team, we have one speech pathologist who's very close to becoming full-time. She's part-time right now. We do share her with another school, but she's still part-time. And then the occupational therapist is part-time. She's here 2 days a week. The speech language pathologist is here 3 days a week. We do have two paraprofessionals that work with our intervention specialist. Our intervention specialist is full-time. So with 20 kids, recommendation-wise, the public districts will assign about 12 students per intervention specialist. If I mean, not 20 kids, 12 kids per intervention specialist. I'm sorry, I misspoke myself. 12 kids per intervention specialist. And if you go above and beyond that, they're going to need help. So we don't have a second intervention specialist. We have a couple of paraprofessionals that help her out, which is the way she directed that, because she didn't want to split things up due to the fact that she's been Orton Gillingham trained. So she's like, if we don't get somebody else that's in there, I should be dealing with the kids reading wise, but we don't want to divide it up that way. We'd rather divide it up. K-4 is the one intervention specialist, 5th through 8th is the other. She's like, give me a couple paraprofessionals and we'll be able to service the kids that we have here in the school. So that's why we did it in that particular fashion. But again, that's unique to every school. If you end up with 20 kids, you might need a full-time and a part-time intervention specialist. And if that's available in your area, awesome. But we do have a couple parents that have some background in special education. They were pretty easy to hire and they're working out really well.
Awesome. Did you notice, does your billing rate change based on years of experience or a flat rate based on title?
Yes, you have the ability to change your billing rate at the beginning when you reapply for Peterson. So initially 8 years ago, I was billing for $35 an hour for intervention services. We've had a couple different intervention specialists. So you're determining her salary and then basing an hourly rate. She's salary, but I base her hourly rate off of the salary that's there. So you have the ability to raise and lower those particular services, but you can only do it at the beginning when you're applying for the scholarship in November.
And also to the question, which is really quite the question these days, how often and what lag time for the money coming back from ODE? Like when you submit
Okay.
how often or what's the process?
So your intervention team is required to put progress reports in quarterly. You cannot bill until those progress reports are in. So once you submit the progress reports for that particular quarter, if you want, you can bill every single month and get a check every single month. So the billing window is open from the 1st to the 10th of every month. So if you want a check at the end of September, you can you can submit for billing between September 1st and September 10th, and then the checks come in on the 25th of that month.
Okay.
And they have not been held up by the Postal Service in any way, shape, or form. So I don't do that. I bill quarterly. So the scholarship does do 12-month billing cycle. It's a fiscal year. So I will bill for July, August, and September. So those checks, when they come in September, are a little lower. And then I'll bill for October, November, December. So that's a larger amount than January, February, March is a larger amount. And then April, May, June is a little bit smaller because we don't have really any services in June with school being closed. The scholarship also is available to parents year round. So if you do have a speech therapist that wants to work over the summer and work with a kid if you can provide it in your building and the speech therapist can come in, you can bill for those services in June, July, and August. No, our people get paid all year long. That they're on salary, and so we pay them essentially because we're Catholic school. We have one big piggy bank, so when tuition comes in, everybody ends up getting paid, and then the Peterson ends up going back into the kitty to service that. So our business manager, our director of finance, she separates out services and tuition from the scholarships when the check comes in. So she knows who's on, who gets tuition covered and how much they get covered through the Peterson scholarship and who isn't. And so, for example, a speech only kiddo comes in, that check comes in and that goes into the budget item for salaries. And then the people are paid out that way. But no,
Right.
They don't get paid quarterly. They get paid a weekly rate. So for example, the speech therapist is an hourly position. So she takes a day off and she doesn't get as much that week, but she has to meet the minimum number of requirements. So she makes it up the next week. So sometimes her checks would fluctuate, but the intervention specialist is full-time, so, and she's on salary.
All right, super. Hey, we had one more question I have to ask. Do you moonlight as co-host of Island Renovation on HGTV? That was a question for one of our. Do you watch HGTV? Do you?
I watch HGTV, but I haven't
Island
seen
Renovation.
Island Renovation. I'm usually watching the Property Brothers. So.
It looks like we've got one more message.
Sure.
Hold on.
No, I did not have to hire extra staff to help with the JPN process. And I handle the billing. It takes about a day for me with 25 kids to be able to go through and do the billing. So once all of the progress reports are submitted, I just take one of the first 10 days of the month. I sit down, I close my office door, and it's not too terribly difficult. So what you do for the beginning, when you set it up, you go in there, you distribute the money across 12 months. So how much you can bill for each month for each scholarship. That's very tedious, and that can be done once the scholarship is accepted. So maybe the first couple of weeks of August, we'll have all the money distributed in there. Then you bill for each month, even if you're only doing it quarterly. So I will go into September, I will put the services in there, how much it cost for the month of September. And then I will put the services, and if there's tuition, I'll put in a tuition amount that's divided by 12. I will save that. I'll submit it for billing. And then when I go into October, since the services are all the same from September to October, I just import that over. It populates it all in the portal and I click submit. The 2 months that I'm not doing that, August, because we're only in school 2 weeks in August, we're only in school 2 weeks in December, I do those differently. So those are half of the services is what they are in the month of September. So, but for April, I'm just importing the invoice that I put in for September because it's a monthly, those IEPs don't change until they're rewritten. So as long as the IEPs are the same, you can just keep importing the invoice from the previous months. And once you have it set up, it's pretty easy. So the first quarter billing is the longest. And then the second, third, and fourth quarter billing, they really don't, they don't take as much time. Don't tell my secretary that. She thinks I'm in my office the entire day doing nothing but billing for second, third, and fourth quarter for Peterson.
No, this is great. You have hit your 30-minute mark. I want to thank you. You've been awesome. And Dave, it went fast, but we appreciate you doing this for us today. And we had 17 participants. So nice job getting the message out to a number of people across the state. And wait, I've got one more question here. I don't want to miss it. Oh, somebody just saying fantastic. There you go. Good job, Dave.
Yeah, I tell you, I was hesitant. The teachers were hesitant. It seemed very, very scary, but it is an immense source of pride for our school to have a special education department and a special education team. It's been a blessing of epic proportions. And it's something that you can point to when you have potential parents, even if they don't have a kid on IEP, is that we accept kids on IEPs and we have a team that can help them learn just as well as what everybody else can. It helps the school gain a reputation that you're willing to service kids of all varying degrees. So
That's great.
It's been good.
That's awesome. I will also encourage you guys. We do have 2 more webinars that we're going to be presenting. Serving students IEPs, testing and monitoring with Maggie Bender, who is new. She did not do the big one, the one last week. She's from Marburn Academy in New Albany. And then management and finance, how to bill and charge, which we got a little of that today with Kathy Stoops at Holy Family in Poland. But I appreciate you guys all being here. I totally am grateful for Mr. Nichols for doing this today and last week. Like you said, you're sharing, I mean, you're doing God's work. You really are. And we are very grateful. And I was quite impressed when I made the visit to the school and spent an hour at St. Joe's Mommy and got to meet some of your people and see the happy faces. It's a pretty special place. So I appreciate all that you're doing at St. Joe's. Thank you so much, Dave.
Thanks, Ann. Sorry, I had a little new clicking issue.